What is up, everybody? Booztown GB here, coming at you, and today we're going to be going over some turbo barrel stuff. You can see the old ones right here. This video is supposed to be a little different, but it is going to be what it is. So what you're about to see is before any of this was done. It was at a time when I was figuring out that power turbo on the exhaust housing of the primary turbo. Basically, it had an alternator pulley bolted to the compressor wheel, and here's a picture of it. Here's a bunny first. See how close we can get. There you go, you little fucker. Anyway, so here's a picture, and basically, the power turbo, or the one that I was going to turn the alternator with, wouldn't spin, it wouldn't work on the exhaust housing. It was too much back pressure to let the exhaust out. So what I ended up doing was I put it downstream of the intake tube of the turbo. So basically you're blowing the boost pressure through the exhaust housing, and then the exhaust out of that turbo goes into the chamber. It's backwards, but it worked. Basically, I was testing out the pressure side of everything, because I figured, well, if the exhaust can't push it out, if it needs the exhaust to be free-flowing out the turbo barrel, then so be it. Let me try the intake side. Maybe it doesn't matter as much. Maybe the vacuum pressures and the boost pressures will just simply overcome what I'm dealing with. Well, it didn't, which was very interesting, because I was testing the vacuum on the first turbo inlet, and I couldn't get the steel plate off the inlet. It was just glued to it because I had so much vacuum. Even with it opened like 3/4 of the way, it still was like stuck on there like a magnet. So I kind of figured that the boost and the vacuum was strong enough, but I guess it wasn't. So what I then did was I put the compressor back together on that power turbo and ported it back into the first one. So it's like this closed loop where your first turbo feeds the second one with the air, but then the air from the second one feeds the first one air, and then it just kind of loops back into the second one. So here's a video of it operating. It was like 90 degrees on the second turbo. The intake pipe to the first turbo was like 90 degrees, and then it was like 200 and something on the first turbo right on the barrel, which was a lot better than the 500 degrees and 600 degrees that compressor was getting prior to that run. And I didn't measure on that video, but I measured in that same video later on, off camera, the 4 intake pipes into the barrel, and I think they were like 250 degrees. They used to be like 500-600, which was really interesting too. So it kind of was a cold air charge instead of like compound boosted. I don't think it made more RPM. Here's a video of it fully spooling. So after that, I got into oil burning in the barrel itself when I redesigned it back to the single turbo. I had the pyrolysis tank set up. It did make burnable gas in about 6 minutes, I believe. 6 or 7 minutes, which if you can run it for 13 minutes, like, you're not well into making fuel, but at least you got a good start. And I feel if you reloaded the chamber fast enough, you could just keep cooking fuel, because it's gonna stay hot for a while. But anyway, got into oil burning. I didn't use electronics to run the fuel injection. I just used a fuel pump, a fuel solenoid, or a nitrous solenoid to shut the fuel off, and a return style fuel regulator for like a carbureted engine. So you could set the fuel pressure to a certain pressure, obviously. I think I set it to like 3 or 4 pounds once I got it figured out, and you would just flick the switch and it would like it's supposed to. It worked mint. The problem with that was it worked too good. Up until you started spooling the turbo, it was good. Now when you spool the turbo, it perfect air fuels, like, because of the 1-to-1 fuel rate with the boost reference, it would just give it fuel when you give it more air. It was like really nicely set up. Problem with that is when you release the wastegate, all that boost pressure is still in those air lines to that regulator for a split second. So you need some sort of like solenoid on the vacuum line to like cycle open when you release the wastegate, like a check valve. So it just opens up and bleeds the air back down to nothing. So what ended up happening is that split second keeps the fuel pressure at like 40-50 pounds. Well, it dumps all that fuel into the chamber, and because it's too rich now, it floods out and it stalls, the fire goes out. And then what happens, as it's spooling down, the air is pushing the fuel around the chamber. Now there's like a gallon in it, and it hits a hot spot, and it blows apart. It blows back through the intake, the wastegate, everything, just fire like you never seen. And that happened to me quite often with that, because I didn't have an ignition source other than the tank temperature and like hot spots in the metal. So that was extremely sketchy. Could have been improved with an electrical system, but that's getting into, now you have to charge the goddamn thing. Now you have to provide 14 volts to the system so you don't immediately go dead. I drained that battery I was using in like 3 minutes when it was burning oil. Now, I charged that battery when it was just the one turbo with the oil pump once a week. How does that work? So the more shit you throw at this dumbass thing, the worse off it is. Because now it needs more. You literally need to actually make it charge for it to be feasible. So it's kind of a dumb idea to me to oil burn with a turbo barrel. Even afterburning's unnecessary. Like, you can't get a system big enough to do stuff. It's too heavy. The chamber's too large. You'd need such a big turbo, and you just eat through fuel anyway. Like, the whole premise of a turbo burn barrel was to run on firewood, and everybody's got this idea to run it on oil. Just build a turbojet, you fucking assholes, and get out of my turbo barrel territory. Get the fuck out. Stick to your turbojet shit and get the fuck out. So anyway, here's the last pass that I ever made on the afterburner and the turbo barrel as it sits on oil, because that's when it decided to load up with fuel and almost blow my shit up.